The following program is made possible by the generous support of these sponsors. United Bank, with full-service banking for our community and our veterans from convenient locations. By PGBA, the healthcare claims processor for the American Armed Forces, serving those who serve us. And by Conway Ford, dedicated to serving our communities and our veterans in Horry, Georgetown, and Marion counties. From the campus of Coastal Carolina University, the Center for Military and Veteran Studies is pleased to present Military Memoirs. Hello and welcome to Military Memoirs. I'm Rod Gragg, and our guest today is Ellen Nagy, who served during the Vietnam War in the Vietnam combat zone in the U.S. Red Cross. So welcome to the program. It's glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you were how old when you decided that you were going to go to Vietnam in the Red Cross?
Well, I actually was 23 when I went. The program was called Supplemental Recreation Activities Overseas. It's called SRAO, and we were more affectionately called Donut Dollies. And you had to be a college graduate, and you had to be between 21 and 24 years old. So I was at the cutoff because I was 23.
Well, you know, a lot of people in that era, when they were drafted to go to Vietnam, they said, wow, that's not what I was hoping to do. But here you are, a young woman, and you volunteer to go do this. Now, what made you decide to go into the Red Cross in the first place?
Well, I was looking for something to do in my life that was more meaningful. I thought about the Peace Corps, and then I found out about the Red Cross, and I decided to do my year in the Red Cross. The assignment was that you could go to either Korea or to Vietnam, and you would serve as a year. We served for a year. We were invited by the Department of Defense basically to boost morale for the enlisted men.
Well, the Red Cross has a long history of working with U.S. military, everything from nursing and combat medicine to morale and support for the USO and the programs there and recreational things and all of that. Now, when you grew up, you told me in Georgia.
I did, yes.
Right? And as a girl, did you ever think that I'm going to grow up and go to a combat zone and try to help our troops?
No, not at all.
Well, where do you think this heart for service came from?
Well, my dad was in the military. He was in World War II, and then he was a career military person. He died when I was 11, and so I did have a military basis background, as many of the girls that went to Vietnam with the Red Cross came from military families.
Do you remember when you broke the news to your mom that you were going as a member of the Red Cross to a combat zone in Vietnam?
Well, my mother was the one that suggested that I look into a career with the Red Cross, and so I went to Atlanta and I interviewed, and they told me about this program. And my two choices being Vietnam or Korea, and I wanted to go to Vietnam. So that was not what she had in mind.
I'll bet.
So no one had ever really heard about this program, and like I said, from 1965 to 1973, there were only 627 Red Cross women that went. So it's not like it was common knowledge about the position. So. And I decided that I wanted to go to Vietnam. I was curious about the Vietnam War. I was a journalism major. I had read, about the war, and so I wanted to see it firsthand.
And you wanted to help?
I did. It did.
And do you think that came from being part of a military family?
I do think that probably my basis for that. But we came up at a time with Kennedy to serve our country, and so that's what I wanted to do.
That's not what your country can do for you,
but what you can do for your country. And so that was really fresh on my mind and something that I wanted to do.
So you arrived in Vietnam when and how?
Okay, we flew commercial airline, We had a 2-week training in Washington, D.C., which really was just about military protocol.
So you trained for 2 weeks.
2 weeks, that's it.
And then you
that's right.
2 weeks and off to Vietnam.
And it was on-the-job training. So we flew into Saigon, where everyone with Red Cross flies into Saigon. And from Saigon, I was there 2 days, and we had just like a little mini training there. Then they sent you out to the base that you were going to be assigned to. So you would be in Vietnam for a year. You would not be at the same base. They would move you all around, and the reason for that was not too much familiarity. You know, you wouldn't get too accustomed to one base, and you needed to move on so that you're always mobile. So you didn't get too connected to people. So as it were.
And there was a reason for that.
There was a reason for that. Was that you know, normally you're just going to make friends, and you know your friends might be your group core, but they need you to be friends with everyone. So you know, you weren't assigned to one place. This was not a cushy job like you have in the U.S. and you know you become whatever it is for a year and you stay here at Coastal, or you do whatever. They were going to move you all over the country.
So what were your quarters like?
My first quarters were a Quonset hut, and it had sandbags all around it, and we had one bathroom and a little kitchen area and a little living area, and then everybody had a room and a cot. The next place, that was when I was in Bien Hoa, then I was transferred to Da Nang, and we were in an old nurses' quarters, and those were kind of Quonset huts as well. And from there, we were moved to a different base, and we were in military billeting, which was like screened huts. And then my last assignment was in a trailer. We lived in a trailer.
So when you first set foot in Vietnam, landed there in Saigon, what were your feelings?
Well, you know, you have no idea what to expect. And I think you're just going to hit the ground running. You don't really know, but we're on a commercial flight, and we fly into Tan Son Nhut, and you get off, and you're instantly hit by the heat and the smells. And when we got off, there were military people laying all around because those men were ready to get on a plane to go home. And from there, they picked you up and took us to the headquarters, and we stayed in a hotel for 2 days before we got our assignments.
But the military presence was large.
Oh, absolutely. We were housed and taken care of by the military. We ate with the men, and we were on the base all the time. You did not go anywhere else.
Were you attached to any particular military units?
Different ones. It depended where we were. When I was in Bien Hoa, I was with 1st Cav. There was an Air Force base as well, but I was on the Army base.
The 1st Air Cavalry Division.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
The same one my husband was in.
Now you and we want to get to that in a moment because you met your husband while you were in Vietnam. So you were known then as a dolly.
Donut dolly.
A donut dolly, and was that a name that came from World War II?
It is a name that came from World War II, because they served at the back of trucks 2.5 donuts and coffee during the war. Actually in war zones as well. We didn't serve donuts, but in the Red Cross centers we did have Kool-Aid and coffee, and sometimes coffee cake.
Okay, so typically what were your duties?
Well, we had 2 units, some that were totally mobile that only flew out to fire bases, and that was the only thing they did, and then we had some that were in larger bases, rear areas. We had a Red Cross center, and in the centers you would have pool tables and card tables, and you would have different kind of programming in the evening, games that you would play, you know, with the men that came in. But the mobile units, we were always in groups of 2. There was always 2 women that were together, but we would program and we would fly out. We would get up at 6 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the morning. We'd fly out at 6:30, and a helicopter would either be assigned to us for the day, or someone would pick us up and drop us off on a fire base, in a remote fire base like one where my husband was. And they would drop you off, and you'd stay there for a couple hours, and they'd come back and pick you up and take you to another fire base. But what we did, we worked with enlisted men. We talked to enlisted men, and so some men would be shyer and some men would be, more friendly. So the program design was to get everybody involved. So we would tell everybody where we were from. They would want to know where you were from in the world. And of course, they'd want to know why you were there and what would make you do such a thing. And so then we would have like little icebreakers, and then we would play games. It would be like Jeopardy or like board games that you would have on TV, and it was done in subjects that the men would like about football, baseball, cars, music, movies, so on and so forth. And so we would divide the men into two teams, and they would compete against each other. And so that would get everyone involved, and before it was over with, everyone would talk to you.
How many donut dollies would be in country?
Just around 100.
Wow.
90 to 100.
Mm-hmm.
The units were either groups of 6 women or up to 12 women.
Okay. Now, and all of this was to try to build morale among the troops.
It was, yes.
Did you feel like you were doing that? Did you feel like you made a difference?
Yes, I do. I do think we'd made a difference.
And what do you think that meant to the troops?
Well, even today, we still, I belong to an organization it's called ARCOA, American Red Cross Overseas Association, and so we meet once a year, and we meet, and military people participate with us. And so over the years, so many people have told us what a difference, what a great difference that we made. Not everybody saw a woman, a round eye as we were called, because there was only maybe about 90 of us, and we're talking about lots and lots of troops all over everywhere. So we did not see everyone.
Mm-hmm. Now you wore a Red Cross uniform of some type.
Yes, we did. Yes, little candy striper blue and white uniform.
Right. And when you showed up, and you were in the rear echelon, but you were also a lot of Red Cross folks in the front. And when you showed up and they saw those uniforms appear, I'm sure that prompted some cheers.
Well, it did. It was pretty shocking to see us jump off a helicopter on a fire base.
Right, right. But it brought a taste of home.
It did. It did. You talked about they were interested in where you were from, and then you were interested in where they were from, and it just brought on lots of conversations of things that were happening back home, and what was going on when we left. They had lots of questions. So
for what you provided was that for a moment there was that moment of escape from
right. It's like the girl talking to the girl next door.
Right.
Talking to somebody from home.
Right. And so you were, I'm sure, really appreciated.
We were.
Well, we appreciate you being here, and we want to talk to you a little more, and we'll be back in just a moment. Military Memoirs is produced by the United Bank Center for Military and Veteran Studies at Coastal Carolina University and is made possible in part by the Lieutenant Tab Stogner Horry County Veterans Oral History Project, which is named in honor of the late H. Otis Tab Stogner, Jr., a World War II veteran of the United States Army. The project records and preserves oral history with Horry County veterans.
They're all around us. They're the men and women who served in our nation's armed forces. In good times and bad, they've been willing to stand in harm's way to preserve, protect, and defend the legacy of freedom we enjoy as Americans. All of them gave some, and some of them gave all. We owe them a lot. So the next time you see an American veteran, say thank you for all of us.
The United Bank Center for Military and Veteran Studies preserves oral history from American veterans of all service branches, including the U.S. Coast Guard. The Hack Mintz U.S. Coast Guard Oral History Project is named in honor of the late Henry Hack Mintz, a longtime resident of Myrtle Beach who held 3 U.S. Coast Guard commands. The Hack Mintz U.S. Coast Guard Oral History Project, a key component of the United Bank Center for Military and Veteran Studies. Hello and welcome back to Military Memoirs. I'm Rod Gragg, and we're talking today to Ellen Nagy, who was in the U.S. Red Cross during the Vietnam War, serving in a combat zone. You were telling us earlier
that not only did you do various things to try to build morale for troops in the rear, but you're also up front at fire bases and places right on the front lines. Now that puts you in an element of danger, didn't it?
It did sometimes. They tried, the military really took care of us. So I never worried about being there. Maybe that's crazy, but I never, you know, when we were there, I felt protected because they went out of their way to make sure that we were safe. But once in a while, incidents would happen that, you know, you just don't have any control over. We went into a fire base once and they took incoming. And so we had to bunker down, and they called in gunships and had a complete firefight while we were there. And as soon as they could, they got us out of there.
All right, now you're using some Vietnam era military war combat zone jargon here, incoming and to bunker down and gunships. Now, for those who weren't part of that generation and that experience, explain that again.
Okay, rockets were coming in to the fire base.
Now, fire base was an outward post.
It was an outward
for
post.
the U.S. military.
At that particular, it was up on a hill. That one was. That was when I was in Da Nang in the northern, the I Corps. There were 4 corps: I Corps, 2 Corps, 3 Corps, and 4 Corps. So I Corps was the northernmost corps, and it went all the way to the DMZ. So this was on a fire base outside of Da Nang, probably, I don't know, it probably took us 30, 40 minutes to fly out there. So it was remote. It was in a remote area. And
so while you were there
they
doing
took
all the
incoming,
morale things,
yes, right.
then rocket fire started to come in from the enemy. This was a kind of a routine thing. They would fire on these bases. And when you bunkered down, what do you mean by that?
We went into the bunker to be safe.
Okay, so you were then, what, 24 years old maybe, 23, 24?
23, yeah.
All right, so 23, a few months early, you'd been home in Georgia. So now you were at a fire base on the front line in a combat zone during the Vietnam War, and the North Vietnamese, or Viet Cong, are firing rockets into this base, and they're exploding, and so you've got to hide out in a bunker to protect yourself until the shelling is over. So was there ever a moment you thought, what am I doing here?
No. You just, you know, you react, you do what you're supposed to do, you know. You bunker down. And it wasn't like, it was just random. There weren't a lot of mortars that came in, but mortars did come in. And so they'd order the gunships to come in and shoot at the enemy. And then when it was all over, right away somebody came in and got us out.
But it had to make you think.
Well, it's the same thing they were experiencing.
Right, right. Now, but it was dangerous, and there were, you told me you knew of 3 Red Cross women workers who were killed in Vietnam.
Accidents, yes.
Yeah, in the combat zone. Right, so how do you keep yourself, when you're a civilian in a combat zone, you had 2 weeks of training before you went there. It's not like you went through basic and then follow-up training and to be an infantryman or something like that. How did you keep yourself alert to the danger that was around you when you'd go up to these forward positions?
I guess we never really thought that that was going to happen. You know, it was more random because they tried to take us always somewhere where it was safe, and for the most part it was, but occasionally things just happen. You know? So it was not something that happened often, it's something that happened very seldom.
Now, were there other times where you came under fire?
Yes, we were traveling from Da Nang, the same post there, and we were going out to a smaller fire base, and we were going by Jeep. And we were on our way back. We were probably about 30 minutes out, and it was kind of in the valley, and we're in a Jeep. We were alone. There was nobody else but us in the Jeep. We had the drivers, the 2 drivers, and the other Red Cross girl and I, and we took some fire.
So there were two Red Cross girls,
and 2 military personnel,
and then two
our
military
drivers. Yeah.
Okay, in this Jeep, and apparently
and it was just random fire that we took on random fire. So we got down on the floor in the Jeep, and they were hauling as fast as they could go.
Right.
And I don't think they ever went there by Jeep ever again.
Yeah, well, I would think that, so they would send you out on a Jeep, but they didn't send any kind of military escort with you, just a driver.
Well, I think under
sidekick.
normal circumstances, they'd never had any problems before, but it was just, random sniper fire.
Mm-hmm. Right. So that moment, what were you thinking when that was going on?
Well, I was thinking that I hope I made it back.
Right, that's the obvious. Right.
And that none of us got shot.
Right. Okay. So that's not what you wrote home to your mom.
No, we don't talk about those things.
When you look back at all of this, what do you think was, what was the most motivating part of it? What was what was the kind of the spookiest part of it?
It was hard, We got up every day and we did this. Now, we did have like maybe one day a week off, but you got up every day and you did this. But, when you saw the smiles on the guys' faces, it just made it all worth it. You brought a smile and you took their mind off the war, and you were able to talk about things back home, and there was a lot of fun, and you just did what you did. You just got up every morning, you got dressed, you went out at 6, you didn't get back till 6 or 7 o'clock at night, you got up the next day and you did it again.
Well, and you said that the Red Cross didn't let you kind of stay around long enough to really get to know people, but you managed to marry a soldier you met while you were in Vietnam. How did that happen?
That's a really interesting story.
Well,
okay, I'd been in country 2 weeks. And I met him at the Red Cross Center in Benoit. And
his name
is Ellen Nagy, yes. And
what was he doing there?
He was in the infantry, but he had been wounded, and so he had become the company clerk. So right next to where the Red Cross Center was a school, a clerk school. So anyway, when they went on break, he came over, and I met him. And later that night we played bridge, and he was there maybe just a couple of weeks, and then he went back to his unit. And so we communicated and decided that we would go on R&R together in Hong Kong in November, which was my birthday. And so we wrote letters in country, letters. And
in Vietnam.
In Vietnam, yes.
You were traveling around these different places
right,
in
yeah,
Vietnam,
yeah.
And he was posted to Vietnam as a clerk.
Correct.
Right.
So I would say that the whole time that I was there, we might have seen each other 4 weeks out of the 4 to 6 weeks out of that, but we decided to get married. I got transferred. That was in July, and I got transferred September 6th to Da Nang, when I was there for 6 months, and then I was transferred back south again. But during that time, we met in Hong Kong with some other couples, and then he was able to come up for Christmas and see the Bob Hope show.
Okay,
in Da Nang.
that was famous entertainer Bob
Correct.
Hope, who was
Correct.
working with the USO and doing all of this. And so you were involved in those programs, or
Yep.
saw those programs
Right.
when they were presented.
I did see.
Yeah, large groups of American troops and named performers doing
Right.
these things. Your husband-to-be
Right.
came to see you. Now, did you think, well, I'm going to go to Vietnam and find a husband?
No, absolutely not. That was the last thing on my mind, and we met right after I got there, and he asked me to marry him right away, but I just laughed. I thought, no, I just got here.
Right. Now, he had been a combat infantry
Right.
Soldier, sergeant, and he had been wounded, and
Right.
that's how you met him. Right.
Married after we came home, in August after we came home.
Right. So what was it like trying to date in the middle of the Vietnam War?
Well, I didn't really date. There
Right.
Was, during the 2 weeks that he was there in Benoit, he would come over to the Red Cross Center at night if I was there, and just visit, and we would play cards, and we did entertainment. We had games that we played with the men at night. We had pool tournaments, and we had card tournaments, and we had different entertainment come in, and like some of the men were able to play instruments, and we would sing and have that, and so there was no real date to it.
Well, both of you were on a tour, a kind of a one-year tour in Vietnam. So who went home first?
He did.
And then
He
you
went
stayed
in.
in Vietnam.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Okay, and so he's back home, and you're calling and communicating and sending cassette tapes or whatever people did back then. So how did that all work out?
Well, it worked out well. We're on our 49th year of of marriage.
Right, and now any children?
We have 2 children. We have 2 daughters.
Okay, any volunteer work there or service, military service, or?
No, my daughter's married to an ex-Marine who worked here at Coastal, and she also worked in admissions at Coastal. And she, after they got married, they went to Italy. He worked in the MWR, which is Military Recreation Program, and then now he works for the Veterans Administration. So my youngest daughter is a missionary in Thailand, and she's been there for 11 years.
Okay, and who is she serving with?
With the International Mission Board, IMB.
Okay, so she's over there kind of where Mom was in the neighborhood.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Okay. Well, when you look back at, I mean, almost half a century marriage that came out of your service in Vietnam, and it's not the normal thing that you go to a combat zone and meet someone who's there as a soldier and get married. So, but when you look back at that whole experience, what about it is the most meaningful to you?
I've never regretted a day that I went. It's probably the best year out of my life. To serve one's country is probably one of the greatest things you can do.
So flew home.
Commercially as well.
Right.
Yes.
And what kind of homecoming did you get from the folks back home, from the family and all, when you came back?
Well, you know, life just went on without you. That's probably one of the hardest things, is you came back and you missed so many things, and life just went on without you.
What about the friendships you developed in Vietnam with the other?
Very strong.
With
it was
the donut
just
dollies?
amazing. Yes, yes. Like I said, we have a conference like once a year, and many of the girls that I served with come back. And the one girl that I went to, Benoit, my first station in Benoit, we have been friends all these 50 years. She lives in Seattle, and she has just been a fabulous friend. My husband now has cancer, and it's related to Agent Orange. And he had a stem cell transplant in Seattle, Washington, and we went and lived with them for 4 months. So, and it's just a sisterhood there's just nothing like it.
That emerged under harm's way.
Yes, yes.
Right.
And those friends are, you know, we can pick up where we left off 50 years, 40 years, or whatever, but we went to San Antonio, and I saw another young woman that was there with me, and we went to Australia, and another woman, she married an Aussie, and we visited them in different donut dollies that I was friends with. We've gotten together with. More recently, you know, I think there was a period in which there hasn't been much interest in the Vietnam War or the people that were in the Vietnam War, and just recently in Congress they recognized the Red Cross workers that were in Vietnam.
Right, and the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War, and a salute to American veterans, which is part of what we're doing with this program. But we want to salute you too, and thank you for your service and for volunteering to serve your country the way you did in Vietnam.
Well, thank you.
And we want to thank you too for joining us for Military Memoirs.
The preceding program is made possible by the generous support of these sponsors. Conway Ford, dedicated to serving our communities and our veterans in Horry, Georgetown, and Marion counties. By PGBA, the health claims processor for the American Armed Forces, serving those who serve us. And by United Bank, with full-service banking for our community and our veterans from convenient locations.